Trump with the F-47.
Sorry about that. It's tipping. It maybe start out with...
Okay, that's why it's all kept under wraps. One day it'll all come out in the open.
Your body, but it started to tip.
Just with a grain of salt. So have a listen to the interview. Don't be too biased. I'm not putting the whole thing on. I'm just going to put parts that I know that are very... the listener wants to hear about directed energy weapons and what happened with the 9/11 towers, because that's our only evidence of a major event that changed the world. It was never the same after that. It's never been the same since. So it is a big event. It was probably the biggest event, next to World Wars and Pearl Harbor and all these sort of events that you could possibly name as false flags. This is probably the most modern one. Nearly 24 years ago now. Doesn't matter. It's still fresh in many people's memories because it was videoed. This is the big deal. It was actually like a theatre performance. It was all videoed. And, you know, there was other evidence, like there was people flying in the sky at the time, even though I think there was like a no-fly zone. But there was shots of the building in an aerial view that's actually on the front of Dr. Judy Wood's book called Where Did the Towers Go, that were actually banned to the public. They weren't allowed to be shown to the public until it was all verified later. So if you look at that photo, even the photo on the front of her book of Where Did the Towers Go is amazing, because it looks like the building is dustifying and the dust is flying up because the bottom of the building hasn't collapsed. So it's collapsing from the top. And they all say, oh, well, that was the jet fuel. Unfortunately, you still believe in the pantomime. That's fine. But if you talk to many engineers, they don't believe a word of it, people. None of them. Anyway, have a listen to Dr. Judy Wood, interviewed by myself, Adam, back in 2013.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are on air. So we should get into the science of it, of how can this happen? What can cause dustification on such massive buildings in such a short space of time?
Oh, we don't start out with the answer. Remember, you start out with what happened before you can determine how it happened.
That's right.
And if you don't know what happened, you keep looking at the evidence until you do, because the evidence always speaks the truth.
Well,
but the key is not to allow yourself to be distracted away from what the evidence is telling you.
Okay, well, we'll get the answer at the end, then I suppose. So you're right, actually. I should have waited till
And especially if it's something you haven't seen before.
Yes, you can't understand it. Yeah.
Against the laws of physics.
Well, it isn't against the laws of physics.
It's just another way.
Yeah, there's something interesting that folks often point out is the tipping top of Tower 2. Tower 2 was the first building to go away. You know, it was the second building to get an airplane-shaped hole in it, but it was the first building to go away. Now, it started to tip about the top 35 stories. You know, it tips over. It looks like it's, gaining momentum, turning over, and then it stops tipping. It maybe even tip back a little bit, and then shrinks up into nothing. And folks say that violates the laws of physics. No, the angular momentum, the conservation of angular momentum, can be maintained if it's maintained as a whole, not as a rigid body, because the whole building is tipping as a rigid body. But if that rigid body became a whole bunch of little dust specks, and each of those dust specks continued rotating, the laws of physics are maintained.
Well, that's interesting.
It's pretty surprising, isn't it? But you remember seeing that, how it looks like it's tipping and then it doesn't keep tipping?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That's how it it could still be obeying the laws of physics. Now, why did the molecules, instead of being attract each other, start repelling each other? That you begin to notice when the building is just turning to dust. And even as it's falling, you see pictures of steel falling through the air. And actually on that webpage, the Cliff Notes page, at the top, you'll see a video number 1. That shows, you see this, from the northwest corner, when you see the corner is this bright line, you'll see a beam appear, a steel beam, and you see it's whitish, it's bright with the dust trailing behind it, and then pretty soon you don't see the beam anymore, you just see the dust. And you know that dust has a lot more surface area per weight. It catches the wind, has a lot more air resistance. It's not going to fall faster than a steel beam. So what the heck's going on here? You got steel trailing this opaque trail of dust, and then the beam gone, and it's just dust. And you go and look down in the intersection right below where that was falling. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
And you'll see there's a picture I have, figure 3.
Yep.
I call that the Twilight Zone picture.
It does. You can see the sunlight coming straight through, can't you?
That's where Tower 1 had been. And these guys had been hiding in their little, hideout places, when the building was coming apart. And they've just come out, and they're looking. And how good are you at reading body language?
Yeah. Oh, pretty good. Yeah. Look at it.
Yeah. You see this one guy with his hands at his side.
Yeah.
And he's probably his jaws, hanging open. And you see another with his hands on his hips.
Yeah.
Down
What's going
in
on?
the distance. Another one with his arms folded.
Yeah.
And they're looking up where this used to be a 110-story building. And you look in the ground in front of you there, and you see unburned paper.
It looks like they're standing on snow, Judy. It's just total powder.
Yeah, it's crazy. 500,000.
Yeah, 500,000-ton buildings.
A few minutes ago, where'd it go? Yeah, that's the evidence. I mean, that's crazy. Like, it just doesn't make sense that an entire 500,000-ton building would fall down and leave no trace. That's really, really, really strange.
It's not no trace. It's just that very little. You have to look for it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not. It should be overwhelming to you, though.
Yeah, and in such a short time. That's the crucial thing here is how quick it came down in a few minutes.
Before it hit the ground, nothing hit.
And it didn't come down because it evaporated, or not even evaporated. It was dustification.
Right, turned to dust.
Yeah,
dust.
Yep.
Judy
and the dust went up.
Dr. Judy Wood, you were saying in a recent interview, just correct me here if I'm wrong, but you were sort of discussing about how after the buildings may have whatever hit them or whatever, that they were undergoing some type of lathering or something was happening. Something was happening to those buildings, and it was almost like the glass was taken away, and it just turned to powder inside and disappeared.
Right, and that comes. Oh, I didn't finish my list. I said, okay, yeah. Number 1, there wasn't enough pile left over. Number 2, the bathtub wasn't destroyed. Number 3, there's a lack of significant seismic signal, and of that seismic signal, when you have regular controlled demolitions, you have, as well as regular collapses, you have a surface wave, you have an S wave, and a P wave. And most folks will recall that when people talk about earthquakes, they talk about the P wave first arrives and the S wave arrives. Mm-hmm. And the delay of those two, because they both travel through the earth, but they travel differently, the lag between those two will tell you how far away the epicenter is. Well, it turns out with all the demises of the towers that day, there was no S wave or P wave. Only surface wave. What does that tell you?
That tells you a lot. Wow.
It didn't travel through the earth.
Yeah, that's
no.
And if you get a hammer and hit a tuning fork, I mean, that's what it should have been. These towers, they're sitting on bedrock. If they had banged, slammed down the bedrock, it'd be hitting a hammer with a tuning fork.
Oh, big time.
Tuning fork with a hammer.
A million tons.
And it didn't happen. And with any of the large buildings that day, Tower 1, Tower 2, Building 7, those didn't produce S wave or P waves. They only produced a surface wave, and that's like get up off your mattress in the morning.
Yeah.
Your mattress recovers from that weight that was on it, and it springs back up, and that might send out across the surface, or getting up off of your sofa. Mm-hmm. That's a surface wave. Okay, if you have King Kong reach over and grab those towers and just chuck them into outer space, just take the weight off the ground, that bedrock is going to spring back because it doesn't have 500,000 tons sitting on anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that surface wave was recorded at the various seismic stations, but not the signal that would go through the earth.
Wow. They did just vanish.
And that it's evidence that supports that. Also, another the estimated equivalent seismic magnitude was a 2.1 and a 2.3. Mm-hmm. Seattle Kingdom, which was 1/30th, that's one over 3 times 10, 1/30th of the potential energy of the buildings, made a 2.3 when they destroyed it. But Tower 2 made a 2.1. What is demise? Less? It's just, it's so much more of a building. Not only that, like when Tower 1 went away, the ground only shook. That surface wave only shook for 8 seconds.
Oh, then it vanished. Wow.
It takes 9.5 seconds to drop a bowling ball off the roof and have it hit the pavement.
Wow. Wow. So it was gone before it was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's gone before the ground shook for less time than it would take for the roof to hit the ground.
Yeah. Lots of evidence. They want to get Dr. Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? If you go to her site, www.drjudywood.com, or you can even come to our site at www.conspiracyhours.com and click it on the sidebar there, people. This is an incredible amount of information, and it's a lot for people to get their head around, but they need to get their head around it because we're in what I call like end times, because this is a world-changing event. It's escalating to the point now where people need to know the truth of what has happened to Western society and in fact the entire world, because a lot of the events of the world all centre around what happened on that fateful day in 2001. So this has been incredible, Dr. Judy. You've been able to explain this to us through your science, because really a lot of people these days are not looking to the science of anything because their attention spans have disappeared. Everything's explained to them on the what I call programming on TV. If people just sit down for 1 second and just turn that telly off, go to the internet, go to her site, go to the page that explains where all the links are. This is the one she was talking about earlier. And just have a look at some of that stuff and reflect, because I tell you what, it's not just another story. This is a huge turnaround.